27 at about 4:30. Could you please call the roll?
Mayor Donches?
I'm here.
John.
Commissioner Ackerman is delayed. He'll be here soon. Commissioner Pappas? Here. Commissioner Moriarty?
Here.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Present.
All right, so next, public comment. Does anybody from the public wish to speak to the board? Or how about using the mic right there?
Okay, where do you want me to sit? It's easy. Good evening. My name is Paula Johnson. I live here in Nashua in Ward 5.
May I apologize for interrupting. We also have Rick Dowd from the Board of Aldermen, Randy Denny from the Board of Aldermen, as far as public officials. I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and hopefully a lot of my questions will be answered today at this meeting. At the town hall meeting, didn't seem like you wanted to answer very many questions about what's the possibility of going on at the landfill. One must continue to ask the important question. I'd like to know who's going to be on the committee for this new landfill, the bond to be placed at the landfill. So what members of the Board of Public Works, aldermen, who's going to be on this committee? Do we know at this point in time?
Well, this is technically for your comments. Not
Okay,
necessarily
that's
for
okay.
questions, but I'll be glad to answer that question. We've already formulated the committee some weeks ago. It includes Alderman Dowd, I believe Alderwoman Wilshire, or Alderman O'Brien, as well as Commissioners Tease and Moriarty, but there's been some discussion, I understand, although I've not been party to it, that the commissioner that's on it could possibly change. I don't know, it's kind of up to them.
Okay, being that I live in Ward 5, it begs rational thinking. Why wouldn't you have the alderman from Ward 5 there, because that's his area, to be on this committee? And who do you have as members of the public? You can answer that later if you don't want to answer it now. Who do you have as members of the public from that area, from the Ward 5 area? You know, that's an important question. Why, I guess, wouldn't Mr. Ackerman, Commissioner Ackerman, who lives right in the neighborhood that I live in, that's right off of West Hollis Street in Ward 5? I mean, these are important questions because here you're thinking about moving the barn from where it is now in our sports complex, which we knew was going to happen eventually when you put the Y there. Stello started it. You got Conway Ice. Conway Ice wanted another sheet since I was on the board. That was back, I think, in 2005 when I left the board at the end of 2005. They only pay, I believe, $1 a year for a 99-year lease. That's outrageous. I fought that when I was on the board. I would not vote for it because it was not in the best interest of the citizens of the city not to have our land leased at fair market value. And at this point in time, to even think about putting the bond in the landfill, which I believe, Mayor, you were the one who wrote the ordinance or had part of the ordinance, said it wouldn't go on the land that was purchased outside of the landfill. So now to me, in my opinion and my thought, it's kind of circumventing that piece of legislation, that ordinance, to stick it in versus outside. The question then begs, we need to beg to differ. That's okay, you can disagree whatever you want. I have the floor, I have the microphone. Since you said you can't answer, I've got the floor right now. You can, I don't think it's funny, Commissioner Tease.
We've only got an hour.
That's okay, you didn't want to answer this Monday. It's my right as a public citizen to ask these questions, and I don't appreciate it, Mr. Tease laughing. This isn't a laughing matter. You should be more professional rather than laughing at a constituent asking questions here.
All right, but I'm just saying, we only have an hour.
And don't make faces at me either.
Paula, stop interrupting.
Mrs. Johnson or former Alderman
Stop
Johnson, you
interrupting,
could say.
please. Could you stop interrupting just for a minute? We only have an hour.
I'm almost done.
So if you've got more than like 5 minutes, could you come back some other time? And
No,
we're
I
trying to-
can't. I have a life. I have a life, you know? And this is my taxes and my life. So the question would be, you have Alderman Dowd, Alderman Wilshire, Alderman O'Brien, that aren't part of Ward 5, okay? Now, the other question is a loaded question, is I asked for a traffic study. Has anything been done in that area? Because we keep building more and more homes, and traffic is getting worse and worse, as I discussed on Monday. And the other piece of the puzzle is here, we've got this building on Burke Street that everybody had to have, and it's gonna cost millions and millions. I think it was like $50 million to fix. So we have a boondoggle on Burke Street. Now you want to build a facility. Now we're going to tear down the barn. Conway Ace will probably get the land, not even for fair market value to buy. Plus, three middle schools, $80 million, performing arts center. Where does it end? And we need to justify and prioritize for the taxpayers of the city. About time, that's what we do. So, you know, if you let me finish, it's okay. But you know, Mayor, I don't appreciate this. You did the same thing to me on Monday. I don't care. I'm a taxpaying citizen. Thank you.
All right. Administration discussion.
Alderman
Oh.
Wilshire. Can I give a moment?
Yes, of course.
Alderman Wilshire's joined us.
Also, Alderman Wilshire is with us.
Lori Ortolano, 41 Berkeley Street. I'll be brief. I attended the last meeting and I listened to some discussion about new development going in on Temple Street and the development of that whole area and the Henry Hanger building that has been around forever. And just a couple thoughts there when it comes to roads and traffic. And I don't know if there's a traffic study being done, but Temple Street, when you go out onto Hollis Street, is super busy, that street, to get out there and make a left or a right. It's really difficult. I avoid that area because of the traffic. And I don't know what impact the new apartments have that are over by where the Hudson Skate Park was on traffic flow. I don't know if we've done traffic studies since that opened. And I'm not certain if you're going to do traffic studies for when the units go in where the Corvo Ruthier is and the Henry Hanger building. But that's just a concern I have. And when you spoke about those buildings, you folks at the last meeting, we talked about the revenue that you generate or the tax dollars you generate from adding new residential apartments or condo units. And that's all good, but I think there's a cost associated with it as well, and I'd like to try and understand what those costs are, be it on roads, ambulance, public service, schools. There is some associated cost with taking in that revenue, and I think it's nice to understand both sides of it, because it all sounds sweet when you say we might get an extra X million dollars in tax dollars, but it's at a cost. Alderman Jetty brought up an interesting issue with the road being cut into before the 5-year period. I had not even known about this issue, but it was interesting to me because he brought up the fact that these folks, these commissioners, are in conflict with that ordinance or resolution. I'm not certain what it is. And that we need to try to figure out what to do so that they're not voting to support development and tearing up the roads. And I don't know if any thought is given that for new construction or development, even if they're going to cut in a side, if it's before 3 years, they repave the whole road. And if it's after 3 years, if the road is 3 years old or more, 3 to 5 years, there's extra money put into a fund that's paid for by the developer to maintain the road. I just happen to feel that the costs of roads are a real issue on the taxpayers in the city, and we're putting really good money into it, and there's a lot of need. I mean, I think it's really legitimate need, but I don't think it's fair to shift any of the burden of the degradation on the taxpayer. And the only way you can do that is set up a point where if you've got a newly paved road and a developer's cutting into it, it's not just the edging you're going to do or or a patch. You're going to do the section, and that's what you're going to work on and restore it to full value so that none of that risk comes back onto the taxpayer. Those are just a few thoughts. I don't need any more time. Thank you.
All right, administration, DPW facility. I think.
Start right in, talk so we had.
Can I ask a quick question, sir? So,
Sure, absolutely.
are we merging our two meetings?
No, we.
Oh, okay, so people can ask public comment after, okay, that's what, okay.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Pappas, for saying, when we tried to set up in room 208, we realized that it was going to be too small, so that's why we came in here.
Okay.
So, still separate meetings, we're just here instead of in
Oh,
room
okay,
208,
okay.
So, okay. So, the facility, committee has met a couple of times and has tossed around some ideas, has discussed existing facilities, the deplorable condition of those facilities. And so the mayor and I discussed that it was really time to sort of bring the committee together with the Board of Public Works and have a discussion now on what those next steps should be. I think we're all in agreement that we have a problem that in many of our facilities that needs to be solved. So that's really what this meeting is for.
I wanted to ask a quick question that kind of dovetailed off of one of the one of the questions we got from the public. So I don't remember the Board of Public Works voting on who was going to be on the committee.
I remember saying, well, who wants to be on the committee? And we had 2 volunteers, and everybody, there was no vote, but no one disagreed with the choice.
Okay,
And
but it
some
was
peop-
done
and-
during
And I
non-public.
believe that there were 2 commissioners who either weren't available or didn't want to serve on it, and that's how we arrived at it.
I don't remember saying that I wasn't available or didn't want to serve. And I understand there are other people on it besides the members of the Board of Public Works, and I understand there are other city employees on it. Historically, I just, because Mayor, you may have forgotten, because it's been a few years since you've been mayor, the whole, a good portion of being a vice chair is that often, they're usually, kind of non-starter, that they're appointed to those committees. And I know that it was in a non-public session, and the facilities themselves were not the purpose of the non-public session, and I won't go into the details of what the non-public session was, because we were kind of stuck, and I think we were all kind of, I certainly was surprised that subject came up in non-public, but I would.
All right, well, I don't remember that part of it.
But I
I'm
would
not-
respectfully request-
I'm not even on the committee.
I would respectfully request that we put the vice chair on the committee.
Now, but what I do know is that neither at that time, nor at any time since, has any commissioner expressed any objection or proposed any other way of proceeding, so.
I sent you an email, but I did
not-
send an email.
Wait, Commissioner, this interruption thing, we should really, in these meetings, wait for someone else to finish. So what did not happen is that when we, as a group, discussed who should be on the committee, and I basically held it open to who's available, who wants to serve. Commissioner Pappas, you did not volunteer, and you did not object to the appointments. So, okay, this has come up now some months later, but it's not like this is the first time that you've raised this. Commissioner Pappas.
This was brought up in non-public. I think that this has been, non-public has been abused by this commission, and some people are better on their feet than others, not appreciating smirking. But in the past, historically, the vice chair has been on the committees, and I was really stunned that you were setting a committee up, and I can't go into the details because I don't want to violate a non-public, but I think that should have been done in public session, so I'm requesting that now. Thank you.
All right, well, at this point, the membership in the committee doesn't really matter because we're here to talk about this as a group, I believe. But what we would like to do, given the various ways that this could proceed is to hire a construction manager, put out an RFP, hire a RFQ, excuse me, RFQ, a construction, meaning request for qualifications, hire a construction manager to advise the Board of Aldermen, the Board of Public Works, and whoever is on this informal committee to, as to the costs and the relative benefits and deficits of proceeding, either in terms of expanding the current facilities, as Commissioner Pappas has written about in the newspaper, or of establishing the office building and ultimately potentially the so-called barn at the landfill. So the idea that I'm floating or proposing is that we hire construction, we put out an RFQ, we hire a construction manager to provide us a informed expert opinion about how best to proceed. Is that something that any of the commissioners disagree with?
I think professional estimate, I'm sorry, I didn't raise my hand, I
That's
was
all right.
not recognized, although, there is a such thing as a professional estimator, and it's very clear to me that it's the will of the director, and I think, you know, the mayor, that they want everything in one facility. And I think it's very easy to tell superintendents, well, come up with what you want. Come up with a price for what's going to be needed here for the facility. And I would say if we want to do an apples-to-apples study, my suggestion would be to hire a professional estimator and have them meet with the Board of Public Works and say, this is what we want to do. We don't want one way or another favored. And
And is there a distinction, or are you just using different words? When I say construction manager and you say professional estimator, are you saying that it should be someone different than what I'm saying? Or are you a different expertise, or are you just using a kind of a synonym for the same thing?
I think there is a such thing as a professional estimator, because my fear is if it's quite clear what we want, what the powers that be want the outcome to be, then it will be slanted in a certain fashion. And if there's anything we need to do, it's to learn from our mistakes. As far as Burke Street went, we were told the price, we were told this is what it's going to cost to build a facility there. I really hesitated. I thought, you know, it could be a really good value at that price. At the end of the day, it wasn't my money. I know you voted for it, and.
Wait, for what? Buying Burke Street?
Correct.
But I was not mayor at that time. Yes.
No, I understand. I wasn't either. I was just on this board. And, you know, there was significant interest in that facility. And we were told, I want to say a price between $10 and $15 million. That's what we were told without any sort of justification for that. And I don't want that to happen again, because when it's the taxpayers' money, I treat it like it's my own. In some ways, with my own money, I'd say, what the heck, I'll roll the dice. And I don't want us to make the same mistake. The other issue I have that I had with Burke Street is that neighbors hadn't been consulted. And, you know, I have to be quite blunt and quite honest, is that my feeling has been, if you even question the one facility sort of scenario. You're against the employees, or you don't think employees should have breathable air or enough toilets. And I just don't think that's the way it should be viewed. I don't think it's fair. And the other issue that really concerns me is that the city is not a good neighbor. At Ward 5, I believe Commissioner Acker and myself were the only ones that were at that meeting. And people are we do have a paving program. There's grinding going on at night. It's keeping people awake. And, you know, I've had my own issues where sometimes having the city of Nashua as neighbor is like having the worst neighbor from hell. And I really believe, before we dive into this and say we spent this amount of money, why didn't anyone raise any concerns? I think that neighborhood needs to be included. And I don't care if you live near a landfill. I don't care if you have if you have a split level home. I don't care if you have a mobile home. Everyone's entitled to a certain level of enjoyment of their homes, regardless of what it is. So those have been my concerns, is that there has been not a full vetting of the issues, and that folks are going to have to live with this day in and day out, aren't consulted. Those are my concerns.
All right, so I'd like to eventually go to Mr. Cummings, who's got some news on Burke Street. We've got a commissioner who'd like to ask a question or comment. But in terms of that, do you think we should leave the facilities we have at Greeley Park? Do you think we should consolidate those, or do you think we should leave those there permanently?
Well, I would like to know how much.
Been there 100 years, so do you think we should leave them there permanently, or do you think we should consolidate them somewhere else?
I think that, well, I don't know if anyone else has some views on this, but, you know, clearly, I don't think that the people ought to be able to have to deal with the 100-year-old facilities. But I do think that as far as traffic goes, and as far as, you know, that just having an area, another plowing area close to an area, I'm not suggesting that we should keep the same facilities at Greeley Park. Should there, you know, I'm not an engineer, I don't know. My guess is.
I just saw the article in the newspaper, and I didn't know if, in arguing against consolidation, you were saying we should keep what we have in Greeley Park or not. I was just curious. But
I'm talking generally through the, I don't know why you picked Greeley Park, but if.
because we live right next to it. I'm just curious, as a neighbor, you mentioned neighbors, as a neighbor, what you thought?
Well, you know, as a neighbor, clearly they're horrible-looking facilities, and maybe they can be fixed, maybe they can't. But should they be fixed and be able to look decent? Yeah, because I'm not here as a neighbor of Greeley Park. I'm here to represent the city at large. I represent the city at large, and I'm concerned about the folks in Ward 5 that live near that landfill. And I'm not suggesting that that the folks who have to work at Greeley Park have to deal with those facilities. I mean, clearly I don't know what kind of facilities there would have to be, but I'm not saying get it out of my neighborhood and put it in some, if that's what you're suggesting. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm here as a public official, not as a neighbor. Thank you.
Commissioner Tease.
Thank you. I happen to agree 100% with what Commissioner Pappas just said. I think we ought to have a third party review everything through an RFQ that is perhaps agreed upon here at this board, so it's not slanted one way or another, that we get non-biased third-party information on the condition of our facilities and potential remedies to such. As I had outlined in my presentation last month, and it's memorialized on page 25 of our package in the minutes, that we intend to exhaust all resources, be sure we report the facts, and engage in a robust discussion when we have those facts. So, lest anybody think that we've made a decision to go to the landfill or made a decision to fix properties or go to Burke Street, that is not the case. It's our intention, and we've discussed at the group level, we want to gather facts. And I happen to agree with Commissioner Pappas that a third-party person gathering those facts is probably right. I think that's what the mayor was suggesting. I think it's a word.
That is what I suggested, yes. All right. Well, we'll entertain that as a motion, I think, but ultimately, but we should hear from Mr. Cummings, who's here, I think, to address this issue.
Is
Yes.
he on the committee? Are you on the committee?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
May I?
But he's, I think, talking about Burke Street. Go ahead.
Thank you. So, again, Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development. I just wanted to echo the comments made actually by the mayor and by Commissioner Tease, and just emphasize the point that professional cost estimators are great to have, but there's no better professional cost estimator than one that belongs to a construction management firm that ultimately enters into the contract and knows the market the best. And so it would behoove you to actually work with a construction management firm as opposed to the third-party cost estimators, which are wonderful to have, but oftentimes they're not as close to the market as a construction management firm, which actually procures the subs. So that's one of the reasons why I think actually going with a construction manager makes the most sense. And having that third-party data to evaluate is the best way to move forward with an informed decision.
All right, so is there a motion to hire, is there a motion on this subject?
Make the motion.
Commissioner Moriarty, and the motion is?
To pursue a construction manager for the, to look at our existing facilities and cost of renovating or rehabilitating the existing facilities, or to look at new construction.
And a construction manager who employs a cost estimator.
Yes.
Any discussion of that motion? Commissioner Pappas?
I've spoken with someone who has dealt with this sort of item, and they're people who've spent their own money, and I do think that I prefer a professional estimator. We are I thought that's what we were talking about before. I think that's different than a construction manager. And I also believe that they should meet with the Board of Public Works beforehand. But a construction manager who has already dealt with someone on the committee or the powers that be that want the new facility, I would disagree with that.
All right, so I think that the way this would proceed, were the motion to pass, is that we would hire a construction management firm with a professional cost estimator. We would issue RFQs, meaning we would issue an RFQ, meaning we would put it out to the public that any construction manager who met the qualifications that we've articulated could respond, and then the Board of Public Works, and we might include a couple of aldermen as well, their support is ultimately needed, would interview these proposed, the applicants, and then decide which is most qualified and which we would want to engage.
And that would be the entire Board of Public Works?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
I think in the end, we would need a board vote to proceed. So I would have no problem with including the entire Board of Public Works.
Okay.
And we have Alderman O'Brien here. Thank you.
My apologies, just got sprung from Concord, so.
Any other discussion, comments? Commissioner Ackerman.
Let the record show that I showed up late, but I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Yes,
okay.
I didn't.
We
You came in about a minute after the meeting started, so.
I was driving down Kinsley Street. What an experience. One of the things I just wanted, obviously, the committee has done some fact-finding. I don't think during the course of the 1 hour, we're going to find out all the facts, other than the fact that the pictures speak for themselves. The facilities definitely need some refurbishing or replacement. What is when we send out the RFQ, do we have local, is it public, out in the public domain, and then any contract manufacturer with estimators can have access to it? Is that how it works?
Correct. I mean, Mr. Cummings can describe it, but I mean, this is a very routine kind of thing for the city. I mean, for example, today we're interviewing engineering firms to do, and I was not directly involved, but interviewing engineering firms who would assist with respect to some of the riverfront improvements that could go forward. So you put out the RFQ to the public, it's posted in some public fashion, and you usually get, a number of applicants.
Okay.
Sometimes you do a pre-submission meeting.
Correct.
But why don't you describe the typical?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, essentially what the mayor just outlined, we would do, meeting not only the statutory requirements, but we would go above and beyond by making sure that the RFQ was widely available to all interested parties, including making sure that they were part of online submission processes, as well as being published in general circulation of newspapers, and also put up in a few places within the city. Once that is advertised, we would then set a date for a pre-submission meeting where we would meet with all the potential firms that would want to submit a proposal. We would go over the scope and make sure that they all understood what the city was looking for as a deliverable in their proposal, and we'd be available to answer questions. And then all questions that were asked, we would make available to everyone after the fact. And then we would receive the proposals, set up a screening committee, interview such firms, make a selection, and then advance it to the appropriating approval bodies, whether it's the Board of Public Works and ultimately the Board of Works.
Just a follow-up question, just so that there won't be any prejudice, we're not going to influence the RFQ in any way relative to, we're thinking of putting a building in Ward 5 at the landfill, correct? We're just going to leave it as, I don't know what the right word is, net new or
An evaluation of current facilities?
current facilities that the city owns or something new, correct?
Correct.
Because I, too, was at the Ward 5 Town Hall last week, and I was pleasantly surprised how outspoken the group was relative to what's happening around the landfill. I had no idea, so, but thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
Yes, it's much along the lines of what we're doing right now with the middle school project. We're evaluating whether it makes sense from a cost standpoint, a life cycle cost standpoint, and an educational standpoint to renovate that school or build a new school. And a construction manager will go in and give you the cost of both options and all of the facts associated with both options, and then you can make a much more sound decision. And as chair of budget and one of the people on the Board of Aldermen, if you're coming to us for a bond, we certainly would like that kind of analysis.
Commissioner Pappas.
Kind of to that, I mean, really, from what's been reported, it sounds like a decision's always already been made. So I guess my question / comment would be for our facilities, because this is very different from a school. I mean, it sounds like the school's already been given away, and as far as the school goes, the other schools do have better, for example, to have to, soccer, there's no fields at Elm Street. So I can see where you're not, that may not be sufficient for a school. What I would like to have done in this analysis, if we say, well, we want a cafeteria, we need this, we need that, part of what I'm afraid is being lost on our facilities, I mean, clearly, we don't want a place with the rats in it. Clearly, there should be more than one toilet in a place. You know, there's one area where the office building is probably too close to where a road is. But that said, the difference between a school and a facility like this are folks, most of the, short of an office building, most people are supposed to be out in the field working most of the time. And I really don't want that fact to be lost on what we come up with for what we need for construction. And that has been something that has been really nagging at me since we talked about the facilities. You know, clearly, when you look at a place like Elm Street Middle School, and it's right in the middle of the city, there's no fields, there's not enough parking.
All right, the director, are you through? No.
Well, go ahead.
You stopped, so I apologize.
Well, no, I stopped because you were
stopped.
talking.
I'm just lining up the order of speakers, that's all I was doing.
Thank you.
So have you concluded?
I'm done.
I have been the director for 8 years, okay? I have watched our employees work in unbearable, frankly, conditions, horrible conditions. The pictures are over here. To imply that most of our people are out in the field, that's not true. The city engineer many days cannot come to work because he's so sick because of that building. We tried to fix the air quality in that building, and we couldn't. Park and Rec has one toilet for men. The building is horrible. They don't even have meeting space. The street department doesn't have enough room to be able to have a break. There are men and women having break out in the garage because they don't have a place. And you know, to say that I have anyway suggested that just put everything you want in a building is just absolutely not true. It would be very easy for me to just bury my head in the sand and say, you know what, my office is fine, but it's not okay. It's not okay for these people to be working in the conditions that they are working. And this group here, this staff that's sitting here, have spent enormous amount of hours talking about this and talking about what can be done and talking about how can we make that just a little bit better for our staff. You know, they don't have locker facilities. There's no locker facilities for women at the landfill. In the type of environment that they work in. The administrative assistant has mice in her, every year has mice in her office. You know, those conditions, the environmental engineer, I think there's a picture of his office over there. I mean, he doesn't even barely has a desk. And then there's two people living in what amounts to a closet. Something needs to be done. I am not suggesting that we have to have a new facility. All I'm suggesting is that we have safe and clean offices for our staff. They deserve that. And that's what I'm advocating for. Nothing more, nothing less. And I practice what I preach. The furniture that I have in my office is my own. It's my own. My chair came from the landfill when I was there. It came from the landfill, something Staples dropped off. Andy Patrician can attest to that. Jeff can attest to that. My heart is in the right place here, and I want everybody to know that. I care about these people, and I want them to have decent conditions. I don't want them to have a Taj Mahal. I've never advocated for that, and these people around this table will tell you that.
I had said before that we would go next to Mr. Dowd, then to Mr. Tees.
First of all, I would never compare a school with a condition for a construction building as far as the entity itself. the similarity is that you want to do an engineering study. And by the way, the decision on the middle school has not been finalized. I've said since day one, until I have a document in my hand that shows which way we should go from a cost standpoint on a $60 to $80 million project, that I can give the taxpayers and say, this is why we're going this way, that this final decision will be made. And we have an architect doing it right now. They are evaluating all 3 existing middle schools and the new site. And all of that data will be presented in public hearings or public information. And at some point, the Joint Special School Building Committee will make the decision on which way we go. And then the Board of Aldermen will have to approve the bonding. Similar to what would have to happen here. You have an evaluation by professionals that look at your current facilities versus a new facility and look at the cost and the cost over the next 20 years, and you make a decision. On the surface, I would agree with Director Photo. 3 of us have had an opportunity to visit all of the facilities, and quite frankly, I'm shocked that we're having our people work in those kind of facilities, those kind of conditions. A couple other minor points, at Greeley Park, if you take the facility out of Greeley Park, the Park Rec, there will have to be a small building left there for the summers for the mowers, because they mow every single day. But the basic bulk of it would leave. All of their trucks are stored outside. And from a cost standpoint for the Board of Aldermen, when you have $1 million vehicles, or in those cases probably less than that, if you lose a few years off their life because it's outside in the elements, that impacts the city and it impacts taxes. So that's another thing to look at when you're looking at this project. Another thing on the Burke Street property, the reason we approved it at the Board of Aldermen level was because the wastewater treatment plant needed to isolate a piece of property for future growth, which, by the way, has been done, and it's been subdivided. The city owns that additional land, and now we have it. If we'd allowed somebody else to buy that property, and they developed that whole property, it would have cost us at least twice as much to get that land, and we would have only been buying a little piece. So there's a lot more to Burke Street than has been put forth, but you need to have somebody come in, take a look at your current facilities, and does it make common sense to spend millions of dollars to fix them when they're that old and they're in that shape, as opposed to building a single facility, and wherever that is, that houses the entire department. Just the coordination alone and having your vehicles inside saves millions of dollars. But you want somebody to document that in a report, an engineering analysis, and you can give it to the taxpayers and say, this is why we're going this way. That's all I get.
Commissioner Tees.
I wanted to reiterate again, no decision based on the committee structure has been made, and to Commissioner Ackerman, you raised a point earlier. One item we discussed that I know you had brought up at one meeting was potentially a second floor at the street department, right? So that was part of a robust discussion, and after analyzing all these different opportunities, we thought it'd be in the best interest to have a third party who understands this, what Alderman Dowd just said, and memorialize it for us and help us get to a decision. So I don't know where the idea of we've made a decision or we are going to build at the landfill came from. Certainly that was a discussion point, but no decision has been made.
Andy?
All right, we got a lot of hands, but I think I'll defer now to our advocate up in Concord.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Brian?
I just don't want to rehash subjects, but coming in late, again, my apologies. But this is nothing new, and, to present to Commissioner Pappas and to others, I have a long history with the city. I spent 35 years working for the city as a firefighter. I lived in some appalling conditions. The Lake Street Station, the old Lake Street Station that we turned into fire alarm my first night there, the shades were blowing. The Modine heater came on and didn't shut off until sometime in April or May. And why should we live like that? But after my first night of staying there, I said to the wife, how many extra blankets do we have? You know, because I froze. Our city employees are the most valuable people. They're the ones that make the city tick, and we need to give them the proper tools into doing it. And one point that hasn't been brought up, every building that the city builds has a life expectancy to it, whether it be a fire station, a school, or anything. And we look at Elm Street. Elm Street is gone past its life expectancy. It appears now that the Public Work Garage has gone back its life expectancy. On the tour, I saw drains that were clogged. From years of being out on the road, sand and everything else, there's new systems. We have those systems in the fire department, where the truck comes back from a run, you've got snow and ice and everything else that goes down. Are we talking about a heated floor that will kind of melt that and give the longevity to the truck? Are the trucks being cleaned? If you're delivering salt or brine, that truck's already in jeopardy. So it would behoove to get that truck washed and cleaned as quickly as possible to keep the longevity of the truck. And to get into the mice for people who work there, that's unhealthy, you know. But I worked at Crown Hill Station when it rained out, it came right down until the station was repaired. That was another building that was built in 1928 and went past. And unfortunately, as chairman of the infrastructure committee, I see a lot. I see now a sewage treatment plant up north, one of our main interceptors up north. We're down to one turbine. I hope that turbine doesn't fail. We should have two. But if that other turbine fails, we got issues, okay? So the thing is, in many years, did we go over proper maintenance or money to repair, and how could we? If we had like a vehicle, like a spending cap, really, what money really did go into the infrastructure and try to repair some of this infrastructure? So the thing is, now we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We're in an era right now that we're looking not to think about our past, but the future. And when you build a fire station, in the example, you don't build it for today, you build it for the needs of tomorrow. So when we build this station, maybe it might have some bells and whistles, but all these things, the industry changes, and we'll look at the needs of what Public Works of the future is going to need in the future. And this is where we're going to need the professional help of the, putting out the RFP to get the architects to come in and knowing exactly what a proper facility is going to need for the future. And then, how does the taxpayer benefit? Well, the taxpayer benefits because we have an infrastructure that is healthy, that's going to last, has longevity, and if we smarten up and do our proper preventative maintenance and everything of our structures, they should last, you know. It's tough when you're trying to get like, I need a new roof. Oh, not this year. So the thing is, I truly support this project. I think it's time to really put it on the table, to really debate it, and to bring it forward. Start looking at the costs, and then we can make an informed decision on exactly what we need and the type of facility that we're going to need. So I think a lot of this conversation is in the incipient stage, and I realize that. But moving forward, we're going to come up with something that's going to be beneficial to the taxpayers of the city. Because I look at my job as an alderman. I'm not here forever. I'm only on the short wheel of the cycle of electability. But the thing is, my job is to be a good custodian to the city. Yes. And to make sure that after my tenure with this particular city, that I'm leaving the city in a little better place, that we have good facilities so that we can provide the best in service to the community. And I think this, if my 2 cents in summary, is basically, this is pitiful. And I'm not blaming anybody, but it's time to change it and to do it right And I think we need to really look at this particular time.
Alderman Wilshire.
Thank you. I'm not going to rehash. I think he spoke very eloquently.
Oh, thank you.
And from the heart. And Alderman Dowd and the commissioners of Board of Public Works as well. These conditions in some of these properties are deplorable. We should not have people working in these conditions. What should the Board of Public Works do? In my opinion, provide decent, safe, and sanitary working conditions for their employees. That's it.
All right, Mr. Patrician would like, I think, to speak.
Yeah, Andy Patrician, Assistant Director. Commissioner Tease, just to comment on, or no, sorry, I think it was Commissioner Ackerman. You talked about the street department. We were able to go into the archives and find some plans from back in the 70s from the street department. The only area of that building that could have a second floor would be the office space, which is only about 9,000 square feet, which wouldn't even be enough for administration, let alone engineering, who needs, you know, plans and stuff like that. So that is the only option over there, not to mention, I mean, if you drive through that facility, you'll see that we got stuff tucked everywhere. There's no parking. There's, you know, we have manhole covers sitting everywhere. You know, our stock for what we do, we have, you know, just, there's no room. I mean, we're just overbuilt in that area. But, so with that being said, I'd just like to say that I've been with the city for 32 years, and I started at the park department. The park department should have been torn down back in 1987. That's when I started here. It has just gone downhill from there, but it was just as bad then. We were painting playground equipment upstairs in those areas with no ventilation, no anything, no safety, nothing. And that's the area that, you know, I remember the days of the one bathroom. It was downstairs, and, you know, it was just working on vehicles on dirt floors over there. And then I transferred to the solid waste department. Same thing. I was a heavy equipment operator there. That big heavy equipment, you used to park in those 4 bays of the garage, and there's no concrete in there. We'd have to lay underneath that equipment to work on it, to grease it, to maintain it. You know, I lived that dream too. And I can just tell you, I've lived it for the past 32 years. So it'd really be nice to see our employees get a nice place. That's all.
Commissioner Pappas.
Mayor, I appreciate the passion, but I think to simply ask questions and to be blasted is inappropriate. And as I said, I've not disagreed that we should certainly have done a better job at maintenance, but I feel the same passion for the people who have to live near the landfill and who are already dealing with being kept up at night from operations that are there. And I think the city being a good neighbor is important. And I think that kind of spreading around where the truck traffic is very important. Thank you.
Alderman Jettie.
Since I'm the alderman from Ward 5, I would like to say that when I first became an alderman, in fact, may have been after I was elected and before I became an alderman, I took a tour with, I think, Commissioner Moriarty and the director, and I saw the conditions of that our employees are working under, and in my opinion, there's no question that we need to improve that. And I think that the motion that's before you to have somebody, a qualified person or a company, look at the facilities and see, you know, whether they can be improved, what it would cost to do that, improve the existing facilities, and compare that to what it would cost to build a new facility, whether that new facility would be located in one location or several locations. You know, I think is the right way to proceed. I just, you know, would ask that that they not compare the improving the existing facilities to to building a new facility at the landfill, but that the landfill be one option that they would consider. And I also ask, I mean, Ward 5 already hosts all of the Department of Public Works except for Park Recreation, which is at Greeley Park. And of course, the wastewater.
You got the PD too.
Excuse me?
You have the police department as well, Ward 5.
Right, but that's not in this
Well, I know,
department.
I just mentioned it, that's all.
And we also have a lot of good things in Ward 5. We've got the Mine Falls Park, we've got the Southwest Conservation Area, and a lot of other facilities. And, you know, I'm not saying that, you know, if it turns out that the landfill is the best location for this, so be it. I only ask that the residents who live around that area have the, you know, be aware of what we're thinking of, and have an opportunity to express their opinions, point out different problems that they may perceive, so that we can work that into the plan, take that into consideration. I think that, you know, I know that there's been a discussion about, you know, about the condition, the present condition of the buildings for some time. But I think this particular effort probably started, it was probably an oversight, and it was probably unfortunate, but it started during a closed meeting. Since it was closed, I wasn't there. And you know, the committee appointments were made, you know, at that closed meeting. So I think you've corrected that by having this meeting today. I think it's come out in the open a couple of different times. So I think we're getting on track with this, and I think as long as we keep it transparent and make the best decision we can. I mean, it's going to be, if it ends up being one facility, it's going to be in somebody's neighborhood, you know, whether it's Ward 5 or some other place. And I just think that we ought to be transparent about it and give the people who may be hosting this thing the opportunity to have some input in it. Thanks.
All right, so the motion upon which there appears to be a consensus, and we're trying to get to our next meetings, that's why I mentioned that, but there is to hire a construction manager who employs a cost estimator to advise the city regarding the direction to be taken as expressed in the motion by Commissioner Moriarty. And we would, of course, follow the normal procedure, the RFQ, the interviews, et cetera, before voting on whom to retain. So if there's no other discussion on that motion, all those in favor of the, well, Commissioner Ackerman.
Very quickly, do we have any idea what the estimated cost to get to, no, we don't. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Appears to be a unanimous vote in favor of the motion.
Good job.
Thank you, everybody. We now have commissioners' comments. Any commissioners wish to comment? If not, Commissioner Teves, is there a motion to adjourn?
You, so moved.
Pardon? Well, we don't have any further public comment in this meeting, but we're going to open another meeting, and we're going to have public comment then. I'm just looking at the agenda. All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the motion passes.